Hello, beautiful soul. I am Karina, your human design and alignment guide.
And I am Skylar Shea, your personal energetic guide, intuitive cheerleader, and high-level professional coach.
And welcome to Raise Your Freak. We created this podcast because we are driven to live to our fullest potential and want to share our experiences and obsessions with the frequency-curious individuals out there. We go live every Friday at 11:11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom, so you can be part of the conversation.
I'm so excited about all of this because I love podcasts, but I always find myself wanting to ask questions. By offering you the opportunity to join us live, this means you can ask your questions in real time.
Each week, you can expect various conversations regarding all things human frequency, as well as support to help you integrate.
We understand the importance of tending to your frequency and engaging in topics as it helps you along your path to expansion and alignment.
Our goal is to help you feel a part of a community as you navigate your journey through this lifetime.
We look forward to connecting with you every week live at our Zoom headquarters, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I think we've covered everything, Skylar.
I think so too.
Okay, let's dive in. Hi, Skylar.
Hi, Karina.
How are you doing today?
Great. I'm happy to be back on your lovely couch here.
The weather supports it.
The weather does support it. It was looking a little hit or miss there for a second, but I think we're going to do great.
It's nice today.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Raise Your Freak. And you know what we never do, which I keep on forgetting about, is reminding people to like and subscribe on YouTube.
Oh my God.
We're learning. And so, yeah, if you like what you're watching, remember to subscribe and then you can continue to listen to us.
Yay. Today we're going to be talking all things beliefs. We thought that it was a good second parter to last week because we talked all things thoughts. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go check that out, because today we're really going to expand more on that. And
I would say if you haven't seen it yet, you don't need to see it first. Like,
no.
they'll blend into each other and they'll both make sense with whatever one you watch.
Yeah.
So let's get into it by maybe starting by talking about what are beliefs versus what are thoughts.
Yeah. So the difference, beliefs are more ingrained. They're more a part of who you are. They're more deep-seated. It's your thoughts can really come from your beliefs. I think that, oftentimes our beliefs come from society around us, maybe from our upbringing, we carry on beliefs from our parents. So think about core beliefs, think about money,
spirituality, how you think of the world, how you view the world, how you see the world. Like, are you someone who innately you think that you are lucky and good things happen to you, or do bad things happen to you? Like, those are two belief systems.
Is the world a scary place?
Yeah.
Right. That's a belief that definitely parents can ingrain in you. I know people that experience that a lot.
Feeling and having the sense of the lack of control around life and feeling like life is happening to you rather than happening for you. Both of those are two different beliefs. Life happening to you versus life happening for you.
Yeah.
And so maybe before fully diving in, why Karina and I are so interested in beliefs and in thoughts is because it's so much integrated in the work that we do. And so I'll speak for myself first, and then I'll let Karina speak for herself. But for me, so what I was realizing when I was coming into the holistic coaching world, it started with nutrition and then brought in Reiki. And then I started learning hypnotherapy, because with my nutrition and energy healing clients, they would come to me and everything would be good and they'd feel so great afterwards. Or they'd get their nutrition plan and they'd be like, yes, everything makes sense. And then a couple weeks later or a couple months later, I'd see them again and they wouldn't actually follow through with the plan, or they wouldn't change how they were
Mhm.
operating based on the suggestions that I was offering. So I was finding it really frustrating, being like, I have this beautiful advice, but why aren't you listening to it? Or we just shifted your energy so beautifully, and now it's back exactly to where it was when you came a month ago. And what I was realizing was that it's because that these two modalities I was working with weren't actually affecting or impacting someone's belief system. And so if someone has, especially let's say around nutrition, if someone has the belief and they're coming in for weight loss, let's say, if someone has the belief that they are a bigger person and they've always been a bigger person, they don't have the belief that they can be a smaller person. And so because that belief isn't there, then a lot of things will happen. Self-sabotaging behaviors will happen. Your thoughts just won't align with what you actually desire and want for yourself. So it won't perpetuate the right actions. And then maybe you are doing all the right actions, but your belief still believes that you're a bigger person. So it holds on to the weight. Your brain literally is holding on to the weight. So helping to shift beliefs helps to actually shift your reality. And that's what I've become so fascinated with. And that's why I use hypnotherapy in my offerings now. And so in any work that I do with people, it's actually more about getting to the root of why they don't have what they want yet. And usually that's a result of a belief system that isn't supporting them. And so the hot topic word for this is called the limiting belief or a conditioned way of thinking. So that's why I am obsessed with this work and why I want to dive into this for people to understand it more.
I feel like too, your beliefs are almost like your identity.
Yep.
So taking that thought, let's expand on it. So you believe money is hard to get or the world is a scary place, right? So that becomes your identity. And we talked about this in the last podcast where you can have affirmations and you can speak affirmations. And again, there is power to that. We're going to dive into how they're linked and how they're helpful. But if you're only doing that and you're not getting to the root of what you are, because you have neurons in both your brain and both your heart space, your belief structure, your identity of who you are, they're speaking two different languages. So one is speaking English and the other is speaking Spanish, and they're not really connecting to one another. So doing work like hypnotherapy or shadow work or diving into the root of what your belief system is really can help you shift and become more of a match, especially when it comes to manifesting a better life, manifesting the abundant life, whatever way abundance looks for you. So for me, that's why I have spent a lot of time doing shadow work because I had a lot of limiting beliefs. I had a lot of, and it's not just from family or whatever, it's just from life in general, experiences where I, at my core, thought X, Y, and Z. And what I discovered is the more times I looked at that shadow, did the shadow work and not bypass it, that's really when my life started to shift. And that's why I'm such a big fan of doing that shadow work, getting to the core, because it really is beneficial.
And so one thing I'll kind of explain as the process that the body takes on with the beliefs and then the thoughts coming in and how we can start interrupting them. So this just happened this morning to me, and I was at a coffee shop and their debit machine wasn't working. I didn't know this at the time. They didn't know this at the time, but I went to go pay and it said declined. And immediately I felt it in my body. Like my body was viscerally reacting. The heart space was amping up, feeling dysregulated. And immediately the thought process goes to start trying to make sense of the dysregulation in the body. And often those first thought processes will be a clue to your limiting beliefs. So for me, it is, I did a mistake and there's no money in my account anymore. And so I had two choices there. I could let that thought process continue, or I could immediately quill that thought process. And I immediately quilled it by, I have, as I've said in probably last week's podcast, I have this thought pattern that I say to myself that helps to start shifting the neural pathways. So this is how thoughts are different from beliefs, where thoughts can help to shift your beliefs if you're conscious about it. So I start saying to myself, money comes to me easily and effortlessly. Money comes to me easily and effortlessly. And that slowed the dysregulation, allowed me to come back to a center space. And then it's like, okay, let's actually make sure that I can confidently remind myself and tell myself this isn't my credit cards or this isn't my debit cards problem. By doing that, I check my phone and check my account. And of course, like I have lots of money in my account. So I'm fine. I'm not dysregulated anymore. I am simply thinking like, oh, there's an issue with their system, not my system. And so I just was able to walk away from that. And then like literally my mood changed. That's just an example sort of in real time, how the dysregulation happens, the thoughts triggered by your core beliefs might come up to start telling you a story. And then you can choose to listen to that story and stay in dysregulation and maybe not even be conscious that you're doing that. So then you have this dysregulated feeling. It feels like frustration. And then maybe later in the day or like 10 minutes later, you realize you have road rage in the car and you're so frustrated. And now this is having nothing to do with what the original trigger was in the first place. Or you can start becoming conscious of what your thoughts are telling you and choosing to think differently.
Yeah, I love that. So your thoughts reflect your beliefs. So the great example that Skylar shared was, so now you have that. So now you're going to change your thoughts to then change your beliefs. So how do you do that? One, self-awareness. Just honestly, just that knowledge is so powerful. Of whenever you feel any form of negative thought, get exploring. Like that's when you put your snorkel on and you dive in, you say, okay, why do I feel this way? What is going on? What's the core belief? And sometimes it might take a little bit. And I definitely recommend, like, especially if journaling is for you, really write it down, get to that core, like really explore it and do it in a safe place where, you know, especially if it's a big feeling or a big limiting belief, to really like be kind to yourself, give yourself a lot of grace and really do that deep dive to figure what the core is. Because once you know the core, then you recognize it. Then you're like, oh, that's that feeling that money is the root of all evil. So I know that feeling. I know where it came from. That's important too. Where did that feeling come from? Did it come from your family? Did it come from your grandparents? Right? A lot of this stuff is usually very generational stories. And then that's where you start. So get to that core belief, because once you recognize it, then you can do exactly what Skylar did and say, oh, okay, I know what this is. We're going to very quickly with our thoughts, change that energy.
Which changes your body too.
Yeah.
Like usually often some core beliefs that you don't want to have, your limiting core beliefs, will dysregulate your body, will make you feel anxious, fearful, like stressed out, resentful, however that comes up for you. And so by being able to become more aware of how or what your limiting beliefs are, or even just becoming more aware of how your body's reacting, allows you to start that process. It basically, the trigger happens, the body reacts, the thoughts react. And so allow yourself to acknowledge, if my body's reacting right now, I don't have to choose to listen to the thoughts that are coming up. You can be curious of them to get an understanding if this is a limiting belief or not, but you don't have to choose to stay in that thought pattern and that thought process.
Yeah. Another good way of like moving that energy through, or like getting to the root of it, especially if you're really struggling, because I know that sometimes certain beliefs that we have are so heavy and so deeply ingrained that like doing your own shadow work or journaling just doesn't really get to the root. So that's when, like, and you can definitely speak to this because this is what you do, hypnotherapy, like getting to the subconscious.
Well, let's use you as a case study in a way, because you're not my only client I've had before that's had this specific issue. And so what I'm talking about here, I teach Reiki trainings to people. So I do level 1, 2, and 3 Reiki trainings. So oftentimes someone comes through my program and they then want to start offering Reiki, or they're just diving into their own spiritual experience. And if they had a more religious background when they were younger, then some of the teachings that are taught within Reiki, because they don't really have a religious connotation to them. And actually, you should just speak more on this of what maybe even the belief pattern was for you. But this was something that you were coming to me for to help clear in a way so that you could show up with more confidence in the work that you do now.
Yeah. So for me, the big limiting belief, the core belief was I have no connection really to God. It's through someone else. And that anything outside of what my church was, which I haven't been in since I was 16 years old, so keep this in mind, that anything outside of that is like witchcraft, or it's not witchcraft, what's the term that they would use? Basically, it's the devil's work. So me exploring Reiki and me finding my own connection to source, which also is demonized in what my belief was growing up. It was a very big block for me. This idea that I have the power, I have intuition, I have connection, and I don't need an elder to connect with God. The man, God, was huge. And I didn't realize how impactful it was until I was in Reiki level like 1 or 2. And I really felt this like resistance of like, and it wasn't conscious. It was just like I was feeling this weird energy of like, what's going on here? Why am I feeling like I'm not good enough? Why am I feeling like this is not wrong, but there was something, and I realized it's because of the church that I grew up in, that this, in the eyes of the Lord, is incorrect. And once I realized it, it was like this big aha moment, because I had never really looked, Shauna, I had never really put a light on that shadow before. And so I was never able really to work through it in a correct way. So with Skylar's help, it was huge. It was profound.
And so one thing that was manifesting for you, which we sort of were realizing too, was that like in conversation with your partner who was doing the Reiki trainings at the same time, she was having this perception or this feeling that because he didn't have this limiting belief and he just was like fully like into it and understanding it, and she was understanding it too, but there was a block. There was this block of actually embodying the knowledge. And she could see him embodying the knowledge and she wasn't embodying the knowledge. And she was making that story come true that she didn't have access to source, but he did.
Yeah. I wasn't awakened enough, or I wasn't XYZ. My connection to source, my intuition wasn't strong enough because I'm not supposed to be doing this. Right.
And so funny enough, like I didn't have to go through that processing for myself when stepping into this work, because for me, I've said in other stories about how I've grown up, and I grew up with a hippie yoga teacher as a mom, and we did go to church for a little while until she started learning yoga. But even the church we went to was accepting of all people. It was like complete opposite of Karina's church. And so all that to say, those core beliefs that she just talked about were not core beliefs I had to move through. But what I had to move through, and honestly, even just yesterday, I was realizing it came clearer to me because I was watching that new Netflix documentary about the TikTok dance cult. What comes up in me is this like fear that because I provide a spiritual practice for people, I provide support for people. I wouldn't even call it a spiritual practice myself. It's more like energetic. But this sense that even though I have had so many people's referrals telling me how beneficial and how supportive it is and all of that, where my limiting belief that I'm moving through right now is the sense of like, I can charge what I do charge because it is highly valuable. Yet, because of how society and probably like multiple generations of society has framed spiritual and more energetic work, it's like if you charge for it, it's fraudulent. Like you shouldn't charge for it.
Yeah.
And
There's no money in spiritualism or that idea. Yeah.
And so
Taking advantage of healing people.
Yeah. That's a core belief that does have to be worked through, moved through, like released. And so again, I was watching the show yesterday. I was like, oh wow, I thought I have worked through this. And I could just feel that inkling of dysregulation come up. And what's so great when you work through things is that this is what happens with the neural pathways in the brain, is that dysregulation comes. Oftentimes it's almost too overwhelming. You don't even necessarily know, you can't get clear on your thoughts. But then the more you become aware of it, the more you consciously support yourself with it, the easier it becomes to acknowledge it and release it. And so yesterday, for instance, it was literally like a 2-second process where like, oh, whoa, like, okay, yeah, that old belief, interesting. And then we can feel safe doing what we do. We offer a really valuable service. This is a really amazing thing that you do. Give it back. Like that suggestion that I've said before. I don't know who originated with this one, and maybe it was from generations ago, but giving it back, and it hasn't dysregulated me. It's funny. Maybe that card situation that happened this morning was just like another example of the universe testing me, being like, how do you feel? Are you good? Are you regulated?
The universe does like to do that. It does like to like just give us, and I see it as supportive because, you know, sometimes, I don't know if you can relate to it, but sometimes, you know, when we're feeling really good, we're like, I'm doing really good. I've been like, you know, figuring out my shadow, and, you know, you're feeling really good. Like your ego's kind of, you're like, oh, and then universe is like, okay, well, how do you feel about this? And all of a sudden that limiting belief comes back in, and you're like, oh, right, okay, yep, you're right, stay humble. It's a lifelong work, right? This isn't there's no such thing as a perfect person. There's no such thing as a completely healed person. This is a lifelong endeavor that, you know, the universe wants to keep us humble too.
Well, and I'll bring back to this example that like that was a limiting like the limiting belief talked about with the worrying that I'm not giving enough value. That was preventing me 3 years ago from even stepping into this work and showing up in this work. And I actually went to a healer who does very similar work that I do now, and she helped to release and remove that limiting belief to the extent that it could be released at that time in order for me to start being able to show up in my work. That's incredible. That's awesome. So that has now led me to this space. And yesterday I have my optimization portal, and I had this new offering that I kind of brought into it, and it's at a certain ticket price right now. And I've never had anyone pay in full for that ticket price. And I've had people pay in monthly payments or finance payments. And I've had a manifestation this month that I'd really like people to be able to start paying in full, because then I don't have to finance people. It's a win-win for everyone. And regardless, someone was paying in full yesterday. And of course,
congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And of course, an hour later, I watch, like not realizing I'm watching this cult video, and that lingering feelings coming up of, oh my God, who am I to charge this much for this offer? And then it's like instantly, because of all the work I've been doing over the years, I could instantly be like, no, that's not true. Oh, look at all the reasons why that's not true. And we'll get into that perspective in a second. And then regulation.
Should we talk about maybe some other limiting beliefs that people
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
So
I'll never be able to do that. It's a big limiting belief.
Yep.
I'll never be able to, right? Like that idea that you're just, I'm not good enough. I'm not able to do that.
And so here's the reframe. If you can imagine it, you can have it.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I'm too old or too young to start something new.
Best reframe is one I've seen on social media, and it's like all of these different women that like from 30 and onwards, even like 80, 90, who like stepped into their purpose at these older ages, really stepped into their success at these older ages. And I can't think of anyone specifically in my mind right now. I think Maya Angelou was even a part of that.
Yep, she was.
So yeah, so like that perspective is, if you're feeling like you can't do it, find expanders, find people that are similar to you, that you kind of see as being like maybe just a step above you or whatever, that you can acknowledge that like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like I hired a coach that I'm talking about, the coach that I was talking about a few years ago, and she was incredible. She was super, super helpful at that period of my life. And she was an expander for me. She was making lots and lots of money at that time. And and she was using such similar tools and capabilities that I am capable of and I have. And so she was a huge expander for me to realize that, oh yeah, I can make a business doing this.
Yeah, that's good. This one's a good one. Money is the root of all evil.
So also consider and think of what songs you would have listened to, especially as a child, around money, because one that was really popular in our household was More Money, More Problems. And I would say that the family unit is the biggest unit that starts our limiting beliefs around money. And you can do shadow work around it. They're like hypnotherapy, meditations. This is like what I help a lot of my clients with. And that's why the optimization portal, which is like a 4-month container, is so important, is because we have so many different limiting beliefs. And so like if money's one, but if religion's one, if this is one, then we're able to go through and work with all of them. And as I sort of said too before, that like the next time, so let's say like you use hypnotherapy to get rid of a limiting belief. The next time you have a trigger, that limiting belief might come up again. And why I record all my hypnotherapy sessions is because it's important to sometimes re-listen to them to actually help those neural pathways in the brain to actually form a really strong new pathway. And so you might need to listen to something more than once in order to keep that pathway really strong. And so money is such a deep rooted limiting belief that it is good to get like some sort, and there's people that offer like specifically programs on shifting your limiting beliefs around your money, and just making sure that you have something that you can continue to listen to, or even if it's a thought process, a thought pattern. So for myself, when I notice dysregulation with money, like I did today, instantly I say to myself, money comes to me easily and effortlessly. Money comes to me easily and effortlessly. It's okay if you don't necessarily believe it, but what you're doing is interrupting the limiting thought with a new thought.
Just one more thing to touch on money, because money really, really is a big thing. I heard somewhere sometime, and it has stuck with me for years now, is you can't help people. You can't help starving people if you're starving. So you can't help poor people if you're poor. And one of my big things is I want to be in a space financially that I can really help other people. You know, they say donating 10% of your yearly earnings towards a charity, that energy flows, right? Energy flows. And that's really, really important. So anytime you think like about money, just remember that, like, you feel like I can't have this money because it's bad. It's, well, we are in a collective, right? And a lot of people are out here wanting to serve other people, wanting to help other people. So you can't do that if you're poor. So don't block yourself from money. Receive it so then you can change those that you can touch, right? Success requires sacrificing happiness. That's a good one. Success requires sacrificing happiness.
It's funny because I
Mhm.
actually kind of want to go back to the one that you just said.
Yeah.
I think that you had a bit of a limiting belief in that perspective, because I've had conversations with other coaches before, and one of the things that can happen is that like we might be called, like we might have people that, yeah, there's a perspective of like you might only be like one step ahead of someone else.
Mhm.
So you might be one step ahead of someone else in something such as being in like in human design,
Mhm.
right? However, the work that you do might be able to help unblock and support someone in starting to make more money, and all of a sudden they
Yeah.
land a deal that
Yeah.
is way bigger than any money you've
Mhm.
ever made. And
Mhm.
so I know for myself, for instance, I have definitely helped and supported people in getting to a financial space that I haven't gotten to myself yet, because we're working with their limiting beliefs. And so, yeah, maybe I haven't worked on my own limiting belief around that, but I'm able to support you with
Yeah.
your limiting
Yeah.
belief
Yeah.
because of the tools that I have. And so I've seen it in real time before, where it's like, and it's motivational and it does help me and it does bring
Mhm.
me to my next level, wherever that is. And it's just that reminder that we're all on our own
Yeah.
levels and our own journeys. And so the work that we do, it doesn't so if you're listening to this and you're a coach too, like don't limit yourself by preventing yourself from being able to
Mhm.
bring people
Yeah.
into your
Yeah.
spaces just because like they might be making more on paper than you right now. I know another coach that I don't know her personally, but I listen to her podcast all the time. And so she's a coach of Manifestation Babe.
Mhm.
And she doesn't make anywhere near the same amount of money that Manifestation Babe makes,
Mhm.
but she is able to coach Manifestation
Yeah.
Babe to make even more
Yeah.
money than Manifestation
Yeah.
Babe makes. So
Yeah.
like the reason, and if you guys don't know who that is, that's just a an incredible woman who has these programs around manifesting, and she's become extremely successful in it. And she has a consistent mindset coach, and that consistent mindset coach isn't making the same amount of money as her. So
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah, that's
just
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
So success requires
Yeah.
sacrificing happiness.
Mhm. Mhm.
I love that one
Yeah.
because it is so untrue.
I don't relate to
I
it. I feel a lot of happiness and gratitude. I'm so mindful to make sure that I'm not don't work too hard and I keep that good balance. Like I am all about enjoying the physical humanness
yeah,
of
yeah,
life,
yeah.
enjoying the delicious foods, enjoying that glass of wine, enjoying those simple pleasures, weeding my garden, whatever happiness looks to you.
Yeah.
I'm so conscientious of just really basking in that humanness because it's really beautiful.
Well, we all define success so differently,
So differently.
too, right?
Yes, that's
So,
really key.
like,
Yeah.
what is success to
Yeah.
you? If it's about making money and
Yeah.
feeling like supported and
Yeah.
stable,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So another thing I see in this with the success requires sacrificing happiness, another limiting belief that a lot of people have is that like in order to be successful, you have to be super productive.
Yeah.
Even that concept of productivity, I help people shift all the time, because
Yeah.
you don't actually have to be doing
Yeah.
to be productive. And for myself and my energy type, actually rest can be even more
Mhm.
productive for me, because by me resting, when I do come into doing some work, I have such a sharper and more energized space to do
Yeah.
it. Like rest for me is productive.
Mhm.
For everyone, rest is productive
Mhm.
at points, but we only associate productivity with action.
I have to do everything myself.
Any mamas out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like bosses,
Yeah.
managers.
Yeah.
I see this so much in any of my clients who, especially moms and especially those that are in leadership roles, this like sense, or like new into leadership roles, I would say, because you have to learn that pretty fast,
Mhm.
that delegating can be really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But it's like with moms, I'll kind of go to this perspective that like sometimes communication can even get blocked or not be very efficient, because you have this concept that you can do it better.
Mhm.
And so you're just going to do it.
Yeah.
Or you like let your partner do
Mm-hmm.
something and you have the belief that you can do it better.
Mhm.
So you do it too.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
breakfast, for instance, let's talk
Yeah.
about this. This kind of just happened to a friend of mine. So she was saying that she let her husband go and like make breakfast for the baby, and he made like toast and peanut butter.
Mhm.
And she's like, oh, like that's not like a substantial breakfast for her. She's not gonna want that. Like, so she also and she wasn't eating it. So she's like, well, she'll eat like eggs. Like that's what I always give her. So I'm gonna make eggs. And then so like she also makes the breakfast, and the baby doesn't eat either of it because it had nothing to do
Yeah.
about the type of food or whatever. But it just like she wasn't
Yeah.
feeling that way that day. And so I only bring this up as a perspective of sometimes our limiting beliefs create our actions
Yeah.
and also create our stories of a
Mhm.
situation. And so allowing yourself to delegate and acknowledge, like, yeah, they're not going to do it the same way I do it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I think generators, this is also a big thing for generators as
Mm.
well, because in human design, if you are a generator, that means you have the sacral center defined. It is the only self-sustaining powerhouse motor center. And so often generators fall into the traps of shoulds and obligations because whether it's conscious or not, you project from your aura the ability to do everything. And this can look like your mom saying, oh, well, why don't you host Thanksgiving? And like you don't want to, but you do because you're like, well, I'll just do it. And then you struggle with it, having a difficult time. So this can be a tough one to navigate, especially for generators, because you have this power and non-sacral beings around you can sense it. So you may find yourself always doing the thing, especially when you don't want to. So setting those boundaries, and not that you have to avoid life not doing anything you don't like, because the laundry needs to get done, the garbage needs to be put out, food needs to be put on the table, but what can you do, or how can you shift things, or how can you ask for help, or how can you say, no, that doesn't feel correct for me today. Maybe, like how can you reframe it so that it doesn't feel like such a chore and task, and target that limiting belief of, well, I just have to do everything myself.
So this was a conversation I was having with my sister a couple weeks ago because she's a psychotherapist. So she was noticing and having this conversation with a couple of her clients that I was also having with some of my clients in that week. And it was the fact that if you are saying I should, it's actually probably not true. Like you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because a should is really like almost a projection. It's the sense, an obligation almost.
What do they say? Stop shooting all over the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a really good clue if you're telling yourself, oh, I should do this. And it's feeling kind of like resistant. Well, you probably actually shouldn't. And maybe there is a limiting belief in there that is creating that concept of should. Like someone's asking you to do something and you've just always been the one that says yes. Are you do you have people pleasing tendencies? Are you really good at looking at everyone else's needs rather than your own needs? So you're like, oh yeah, I should do that. I should do that. But like, wait a minute. What do you actually want to do?
Yeah.
And maybe saying I could instead of I should would reframe it for you to acknowledge, oh, is it really that important to do that right now?
Yeah, exactly. So when you're addressing those limiting beliefs, again, having that awareness is so important. Notice when you're doing it. Those in the moment disruptors, I think, is really key. And then challenge and reframe it. Like say, oh, okay, I recognize I'm going to reframe this. And then the biggest part is seek evidence, because we know that the brain, because we talked about this last week, the brain is always searching for what it knows. So when you reframe it and when you say, I am not abundant, and then you go and you look for a reframe and you look for evidence to seek that I am abundant, and then someone offers you and gives you a coffee, Yay! That's amazing. That's a $5 coffee, $7 depending on where they got it from. That is yours. That you look how abundant you are. You know, whenever you receive, look for those things to change and to acknowledge and to seek the evidence that of your new belief that you are abundant, that you can receive.
So this back to the example that I had this morning where I'm at the coffee shop, the card reads declined. Instantly, I go back to like my 10-year-old self that I like, or like maybe like 13-year-old self where I didn't have a job and I am trying to use a debit card for the first time and it gets declined because I actually have no money in my bank. That like 13-year-old self was triggered. And so feeling that trigger, it was like, oh, wait, okay, gonna remind myself of something else and also going to actually check my bank account to have that acknowledgement of, oh yeah, my bank account's looking healthier than it's ever looked ever before. Okay, we're good. So that's just like maybe it won't be as obvious in that sense, but you can start racking your brain for evidence of the reframe rather than evidence of all the times you haven't had money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then above all, like if you find that you're really still struggling, especially with those deep-seated beliefs, like doing something like hypnotherapy, for example, with Skylar, just to really help you change the unconscious, change those neural pathways can honestly have such a huge impact. And I speak from experience, a huge impact on really changing that. And it's funny because it's almost like it's those beliefs almost become a monster within you. And then when you look at them, it's almost like they change and they seem like a silly little annoying little brother. You know, like the energy totally changes. Like, oh God,
control you
don't
anymore.
control you
You
anymore.
control them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we pick a card? I feel like
Oh yeah, I guess it's time.
I feel like that was good. I feel
I
feel like we've
and I don't think we like talked too much about the same things we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Because thoughts and beliefs are different.
They
however,
are different.
Very much interplayed with one another. Okay, cards, what do you have to share with the group today? For anyone listening, watching, Raise Your Freak, particularly this episode, what do you have to share with us today?
We've been pulling cards from the Akashic Tarot. The Akashic Records is something that both Skylar and I have been diving into and exploring. And so we've decided to create a little ritual that after every podcast, we will pull a card for the group.
You pull it and let me know what way it faces you.
One of Keys, the
Ooh.
Architect.
Oh my God.
I got this one the other day. I love it. My favorite movie of all time. Well, not of all time. One of my favorite movies is The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. And this gives me those vibes.
Okay, the One of Key, the Architect. A man and a woman in rich Egyptian dress stand at a table filled with structural drawings and measuring utensils. He is the architect of all they survey, and he points to an unseen building in this expansive project. Throughout the scene, many workers toil on foundations, pylons, and palaces. At a mundane level, you could find yourself involved in a building project or renovating and redecorating your home or workplace. Most important, this card shows that it's time for you to step into a position of power. In order to do that, you must recognize your talents and strengths as well as your authority to take charge. An opportunity beckons that utilizes your skills perfectly. Feel the command you have over the great scope of the situation and take charge. So there's a special note here. Whether the card is upright or reversed, look at the adjacent card. So we're going to pull one more card.
Oh, I love it.
It can show some specifics about your plans or change of plans. It can also alert you to unseen events or people of influence that are not yet known to you. So please share more wisdom about the One of Keys for us. And all those that are watching, raise your freak.
I like the theme of like stepping into your power.
Well, yeah, and everything that we talked about, we're like giving
Yeah.
you the tools today to learn how to
Yeah.
actually step into that power
Yeah.
and take your control back over
Yeah.
your beliefs.
The Queen of Roses.
Oh. This card shows a beautiful woman with roses in her hair and all around her. A beautiful scene expands outside, but she is peacefully focusing on the flower in her hand. The Queen of Roses signifies a woman who is loving and supportive, but with a passionate side as well. This is a card of a loving connection. A relationship with someone you know may deepen and become more meaningful, or someone new may appear. Be open to the connection. It may be a romantic one, or it might be that a friend, family member, or coworker is going to be helpful and valuable to you in some way. The Queen of Roses can represent you or a woman in your life stepping into the role of wife or mother at this time. It's a time for loving energy to be voiced. This card upright sometimes shows a happy resolution to a difficulty with family, a friend, or a love relationship. The time for peaceful, loving connections is at hand, so open your heart to the expression of caring within and around you. Closing your eyes. Step into the energy of the Queen of Roses. Get to know the caring power and gentle temperament. Feel compassion fill you and notice your desire to bring a loving embrace to yourself and to the world. One thing that I feel that summarizes these cards very well, the Architect card, it's the reminder that you really are in control of your reality. You're a co-creator of the universe. And by starting to acknowledge your beliefs and the power of your thoughts and being able to shift and change them, you get to be the architect of your life. And then as you start becoming that architect of your life, you are stepping into this queendom of your capability. You're stepping into the capability to be the greatest potential that you have to offer.
I like that interpretation. It's beautiful.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so much,
coming.
everyone. We'll see you next time.